On this episode of the Bronze Metalist podcast, we talk about The Sound of Perseverance by Death, because it's Chuckmas, baby! Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Bronze Medalist podcast. I'm Kale.
I'm OJ.
We're two professional broadcasters. We like metal, and we like to talk about it. One of us is maybe going to have a little bit of difficulty saying anything today.
Right. Well, yeah, because I've got like pneumonia. I've got. Which is funny because, you know, we do the 4 at 4. And when we were gone, JD was setting up every day that you know, our boss set up the 4 at 4. It was something just to fucking mock me. That's all it was.
Because of your voice.
Because of my voice. And you know, there was one day, we're going to take you to the classic rock doctor. And it was just all just medical songs, you know, Bad Medicine and, you know, Doctor Robert. And it was like, that's just there because I'm sick.
We're taking you to the classic rock ENT. To take a look at that. But yeah, you're doing a little bit better. You can actually go a solid 60 seconds or more without coughing,
which is not the case last week.
Yeah. Well, you because like I had, you know, the Everything But Friday off the week of Christmas, and we were going to record this episode on the most recent Thursday. And you called me in the afternoon and were like, "Hey, you managed to get a couple words out between coughs,
right?"
And I gathered that you were unwell. So
I was unwell.
But you weren't crazy. You were just a little unwell,
right? I know right now you can't tell.
Yeah. But yeah, so we had to postpone Chuckmas for a few days, but here we're here now on a sunny Sunday afternoon.
New Chuck Eve.
It's new Chuck Eve,
right?
And by the way, there's like a pocket on that chair on your right hand side. You want to check in there? How did that get in there? That's weird.
Oh man, how did you know?
I don't know how that got in there. What is that? I've never seen that before.
This is called Glenlivet. It's a 12-year-old Scotch.
Oh, that's weird.
Single malt.
That must have been sitting in there all this time.
The whole time. It's been in there 12 years.
Yeah. Well, the bottle it hasn't been there 12 years. It's been there like 5 years.
Ah, gotcha.
And then before that, it was. I don't know how that got in there. That's weird.
That's awesome. Crazy. Well, here, I'll give it back to you.
No, yeah, I mean, finders keepers, right?
Oh, sweet. I mean, I could, if I wander into your apartment and I just find something, I can just take it.
Well, if you find something that I didn't know I had.
Okay, gotcha.
And I know most of what I have.
Okay.
So, you know, if I don't know that I have something, it's like Law of Surprise, right? In The Witcher.
Sure. Yeah. Exactly.
If it's something that I don't know I have yet, you can claim it, or however the fuck that works. It was never clear to me.
So if you guys aren't aware, we made sort of a little bit of a small rule for us when we became friends.
Yes,
we're not going to buy gifts. It's like one a year. He buys me a Christmas gift. I buy him a birthday gift.
That's usually how it works. Yeah. I think maybe we've gotten that reversed at least 1 year or something like that. I can't remember, but yeah, it's usually I get you something for Chuckmas and then you get me something for my birthday.
Yes. Well, thank you.
You are welcome. You are welcome.
Wow, this is the good stuff.
It is the good stuff. Only the good stuff for Chuckmas. But I don't know why I'm taking credit for that. That was just sitting in there.
Oh, good point.
I must have, when I got that chair, it must have been in there. Sure. Yeah.
Which I'm sure you actually would have paid more for the bottle than you did for the chair.
The chair was free, so that is true.
Oh, sure.
Other than being rather sick, how have you been since the Christmas season has come and gone?
I've been fine. I mean, over the weekend, I've done little else other than lay in my own filth. That's basically all I've done. Be sick. I'm so full of drugs right now. Man, I am
pumped full.
I'm pumped full of albuterol. I've got the anti-phlegm stuff. They gave me some steroids.
Yeah.
So I'm going to leave here. I'm going to go pump iron.
There you go.
Head down to the Gime.
Get jacked.
Yeah, exactly.
If you had a rap name right now, you'd be called Big Pharma. You're just pumped full of pharmaceuticals.
Exactly. And I think I'm starting to get a 6-pack.
Oh, nice.
Because I've been really, really exercising my midsection a lot over the last few days.
But did you make use of my Blu-ray set?
I did.
Lord of the Rings.
That's another tradition I have. I borrow his Blu-rays and I watch Lord of the Rings extended cuts. Back to back.
Did you watch them all in one sitting?
Not all in one sitting.
I was going to say.
I watched Fellowship and Towers the first day.
Yeah.
And then I think Boxing Day I watched Return of the King.
I was going to say, because Return of the King is the longest out of them, I think. I mean, that was true of the theatrical cut as well, but it's doubly so true for the extended edition there. Right. It's very long. I mean, Return of the King is notorious for how much movie there is after the sort of the action, after the climax of the film. Right. There's so much movie left, which I think is great.
Yeah, it's actually necessary because he's like, let's wrap shit up with the individual characters.
It's providing a lot of closure, which is something that so many bits of media do not do. Right. There are so many stories that, like, maybe sometimes that you don't need that. Sometimes like the closure and catharsis is kind of provided in the climax itself, but that's not always the case. Right. Especially if like the action of the climax doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the characters, so to speak, then you can be like, all right, that's done with, and the movie's over. And it's like, but what happened to all of them? Right. What are they going to do? And it's one of the things that I love about Return of the King, both in the book and in the film, is that these characters you've come to know and love, you get to know what happened to them. Right. And I appreciate that. I like that. It's one of the things that was incredibly disappointing about the release version of Mass Effect 3. Yeah. Which, is long running. It was 3 games of this RPG with this large cast of characters that you can get to know very well. Well, I guess it's sort of I guess it's not really an RPG. It's got the story structure of an RPG, but not necessarily the game mechanics. They're kind of there. Sure. It's been a while since I've actually played those games, but they're not like deep into the RPG elements as I remember. But anyway, big cast. And then the third game just kind of ends and you don't get really any closure on what happens to any of the characters or your friends. Like what happens to any of them after the end of the game. And they ended up making like a free DLC that adds a little bit of closure, still not a lot. They released a trailer like 2 years ago for them making another Mass Effect game that's supposedly going to be a follow-up to Mass Effect 3 because the only character that it's one of those real vague teaser trailers where it's like some random landscape and then, oh, hey, look at this character you recognize. And it gives you no information about what it's going to be whatsoever. That was like 2 years ago and it's been complete radio silence since then.
Monsters.
Well, and also like none of the team that made those original 3 games is still there.
Oh, really?
Because BioWare has basically been completely gutted over the last 5 years, as I understand, especially after they released Anthem, which was a titanic flop. And Mass Effect Andromeda was a fair bit of a flop as well. Right. Which I think Mass Effect Andromeda came out before Anthem. I think that's correct. I don't even remember. Anthem might have came out the same year as Fallout 76. I think
that was a successful game.
Yeah, massively successful.
Yes.
I think that was if I remember correctly, those two games came out in the same year because it was kind of one after the other of like the same basic idea of a game being like the sort of persistent world and like trying to make trying to make a multiplayer version of like the sort of Borderlands style looter shooter type thing, and being made by two companies that have been known throughout their entire existences for making single player games.
Right.
Like Mass Effect 3 did have a multiplayer mode that was quite a bit of fun, but it was basically just a multiplayer version of the single player gameplay loop. Like it was, it was basically just it was like a squad based like horde shooter, like the horde mode in Gears of War, where you and a squad of people are fighting off waves of NPC enemies.
Yeah.
And it wasn't this big like weird sort of pseudo open world loot based weird thing that they tried to do with Anthem. That was, and the game was also completely and utterly broken. Like it was unplayable when it launched.
Really?
And the same thing happened with Fallout 76. And if I remember, that was the same year, and people were like, oh, maybe these companies shouldn't be doing these things.
Right.
Maybe these companies should stick to what they know, or actually, bother to really, really make this work instead of trying to develop it in a couple of years. Like,
right.
Yeah, it was strange. But so I don't really have any confidence that if they do release a new like Mass Effect single player game, that it will be anything anywhere near as good as the original trilogy of those games, which I love. I have not gone back and played them in like going on a decade at this point.
Really?
And they released like the Legendary Edition or whatever it was called, where it's the whole trilogy, including a remastered version of the first game. That was a couple years ago they released that, and I just it passed me by because I was doing other things, and they're long games.
Right. It's a commitment.
They're fucking long. But it's like those games give me the same sort of feeling as like Baldur's Gate gave me most recently, where you don't want to finish them because then it will be over with, and you don't want it to be over. And then when it is over, you're going like, but my friends. It's like, no, they were never real.
You made a commitment to them, though.
Yeah. So those games definitely scratch the same sort of itches as Baldur's Gate, which I will probably like I don't know how long I'm going to be putting off doing another full solo playthrough of Baldur's Gate, because they just keep releasing content for it.
Really?
To the point where like there's so much stuff now. There's so many lines of dialogue that either have been added into the game or like were supposed to be in the game, but for whatever reason there was a glitch that locked you out of it. There's like so much dialogue. There's certain quests that either didn't pop up or didn't work. There's gameplay elements. Like they added a whole new there was tactician mode, which was just the hardest difficulty when it released. They added a new mode called honor mode, which has permadeath, which I'm not a huge fan of in D&D, especially the way that combat in Baldur's Gate works, where like you do get to a certain point, at least I'm playing on normal difficulty, you get to a certain point in the game where every fight is a joke.
Okay.
And like it becomes incredibly rare for characters to, at least if you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know what they're doing because like there's a very large amount of people who have gotten into Baldur's Gate who know nothing about Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
Whereas for me, someone who's been playing 5th edition for 7 years, the game became pretty easy very quickly.
Right.
Because I knew how everything worked. But like playing on normal difficulty, you get to a point where it's like, you're just clowning on bosses, and these bosses in the regular version of the game don't have legendary actions for some reason, which I think is bizarre, because even if they added the legendary actions to the normal mode of the game, it would just make those bosses more compelling and more fun to fight. And you wouldn't absolutely annihilate them in a single turn, which is what ends up happening most of the time. But Honor Mode has legendary actions, but it also has permadeath, which like it becomes a much more difficult version of the game.
Right.
And you can't revive your characters. You can't. There's no scrolls of revivify. If you have the spell on your spell list, you can't use it. And you can't go to. There's a character called Withers who stays in your camp, and you can give him some money and he'll revive your characters.
Sure.
None of those things work. You have your characters. If your player character dies, it's over with. And your player character can die by getting shoved into one of the many bottomless pits present throughout the game.
Right.
And shoving people is a bonus action. So like you have basically, it means if you are starting a fight, you better make sure there's no fucking bottomless pits or deep water anywhere nearby.
Right.
Because that's instant death if you fail your athletics check. And that bothers me. And I would love it if they had like options where you could turn on, like if I could have those legendary actions in the regular tactician version of the game where like revival magic still works fine.
Right.
That I would be an incredibly happy camper, because I would like a more difficult version of the game with more compelling bosses, but not have to constantly be like, oh, well, I got shoved into a pit. Time to start the whole game over again.
Right. It's a good thing you haven't been playing for 40 hours.
Yeah, like that would... I would really like it if I could have those legendary actions in normal tactician mode, because I think that's definitely what I'm going to... Like, I'll probably play it in tactician mode the next time, because, again, it got very easy towards the end. But like I'm tempted to try honor mode, but the permadeath thing turns me off a little bit.
Right.
But I have actually made a decent amount of progress in Rogue Trader now. And I was looking at my Steam page, and it says I've been playing it for 36 hours.
Really?
Which I do not feel like I've been playing it for that long, because it feels like I've made very little progress. Because it's one of those, it's a more classic style of CRPG where you have to do a lot of reading. There's just a lot of reading involved every time the characters level up, because it's a system that I'm not familiar with, and there are so many options.
Right.
When you level up, like, Baldur's Gate is 5th edition D&D, so you don't really have a lot of actual options. There's not a ton of choices that you need to make on level up. Rogue Trader, Jesus Christ, there's like, depending upon which level up it is, which is different for each class,
right?
You might be able to choose like a talent from any number of sources, whether it's your archetype, which is kind of like your class, or your origin. You can choose talents related to all of those, and so it ends up being a list of like 50 things you can choose from. And it's just overwhelming, and having to sit and read through like, okay, what does this one do? What does this one do? What is this one? Like, I've ended up following build guides for a lot of the character that just tell me what to take at a certain level to get a certain type of play style. Because otherwise it's just overwhelming. But like I've actually made some progress, and there's some interesting things happening. Like at the end of the first chapter, like you arrive in this system after your ship was attacked.
Yes.
You need to pick up a new navigator and a new tech priest to like manage help fix your ship, and to like be in charge of the engineering department.
Right.
And in the process of doing that, you find out there's this like planetary rebellion going on the most nearby planet where you need to find your tech priest.
Yes.
And after you supposedly stop the rebellion, and you're like taking part in this victory parade, a bunch of Dark Eldar show up and steal the fucking sun. They take the sun out of this solar system. The sun just disappears. And I had forgotten about this. Like I'd read about that at some point. Like yeah, that's a thing that the Dark Eldar just do sometimes. They will roll up into a solar system and just take the fucking sun because they all live inside like. So there's the warp in Warhammer, which is like the realm of chaos, but it's also how people do faster than light travel. It's like this alternate dimension. And the Eldar have this like, if the warp is, well, I guess this doesn't quite work. They have what's called the webway, which is like a massive subway system of like stable corridors through the warp that they use to travel around instead of having to go around in the crazy, insane mishmash that everyone else needs to use. And the Dark Eldar live in there.
Oh, wow.
In the nexus of that system. But they need like, you know, energy to keep it going. And they get that by stealing people's stars.
Wow.
I had forgotten about that. And that's like one of the inciting incidents of the game is like, well, you got to figure out what this whole conspiracy is and how this happened. And it's a little open ended, but yeah. And then after that, you go to a different system where there's a space station that you dock at. But like I was not expecting that of just like, oh, hey, victory parade. Like I knew something was going to go wrong at this victory parade.
Yeah.
And then someone stole the sun. And it's like, what the it's weird because it seems like there's a couple unrelated things, because also after that, you find out who is actually in charge of this cult that you were fighting.
Yeah.
And you have a boss battle against a Chaos Space Marine.
Oh, wow.
Which like, I mean, if you're, on tabletop, right, like fighting with whole armies, you might be fighting Chaos Space Marines or whatever. That's fine. Or that might be your army. And if you are a Space Marine and you're fighting a Chaos Space Marine, that's not so bad. If you're a normal human, that's bad.
Very bad. Yeah.
It's not good at all. And I had multiple characters go down and going like, I don't think your characters can permanently die in combat in Rogue Trader, but once they are unconscious, you can't do anything about that. Like you can't bring them back up as far as there might be some powers available for like psychers or something. But once they hit the floor, they're done for the rest of the combat.
Sure.
And I had 3 people go down, I think, out of a team of 6. It got pretty hairy towards the end, but yeah, that was a pretty cool moment. So I'm starting to get to some of the cool stuff in Rogue Trader after sitting and reading for hours and hours and hours and hours.
Sure.
I also bought I have another computer on the way.
Oh yeah, that's right. You said that.
So we'll see
if it gets here.
We'll see if this one gets here. God, I really hope it does. It ended up being the same computer as the one I ordered last time.
But it cost you what, $500 more?
It wasn't that much more expensive. I think the total purchase still ended up. I think it ended up being because after taxes the first time I think it was like $1,700.
Yeah.
And this time I think it was just a hair over 2,000. Mm-hmm. It was 180. It was 1,899. I think was the listed price. So it was more expensive.
Yes.
It was on sale a tiny bit, I think, because immediately after Black Friday, that same computer was like over $2,000. So the price fluctuated back a little bit. But
sure.
I did want to buy a very similar computer that had a bigger hard drive and more RAM from a different company, and I was going to buy it straight from the company, but since it was over $2,000, and I didn't have I didn't have an option to pay for it in installments, my bank said no, you can't do that.
They won't just spend $2,000.
Well, they wouldn't. They sent the fraud alert system sent me a text message, and I responded to it saying, "Hey, this is me.
Right.
This is not a fraudulent purchase. This is me." And then it still wouldn't let me do it. And I could not contact my bank because I was attempting to do this on the evening of December 25th.
Why? What was going on?
Well, first of all, it was evening, so they wouldn't have been available anyway.
Also Christmas.
But also it was Christmas. And I just got a little frustrated and just, fuck it, whatever. And then the next day, I was like, hey, this is the exact same one that I was going to get in the first place. And I was happy with that. So
right.
I'll be happy with it again. And I did the thing, and it should be on its way. The original estimate was that it wasn't going to be here until the 9th through the 18th.
Yeah.
And then they revised it to be the 3rd through the 9th. So it could arrive as soon as Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that. I don't have confidence in that. I also don't know because it hasn't shipped yet. So I don't know who it's shipping through.
Right.
So I don't know. It's once again coming to the office. So we shall see.
Pete. It's shipping via Pete.
It's shipping via. There's a guy named Pete.
Right. Yeah.
He's got a pickup. He agreed to, which I don't know how I feel about that. The fact that he has a pickup and he's putting my computer in the bed of his pickup.
Right.
At least put it. At least put it in the cab. Like.
Protector from the elements.
It's not even a flatbed. It's just his F-150. Which is on it maybe better because it's got the sides instead of just being open on. Well,
maybe it has a tonneau cover.
He's splurged for a tonneau cover,
right?
But it might, depending upon what else he's got in the back there, because he's picking up multiple things.
Sure.
Depending upon what else he's got in the back there, he might not be able to pull the cover over all of the stuff. It might be too tall.
Yeah, it might be too tall. Also, there's a German Shepherd, so
there's there's a German Shepherd back there.
Yeah.
In his kennel. Yeah, I don't know. That one got away from us.
Yeah, it did
for a little bit. But yeah, hopefully, I would love to have it by Wednesday, but I don't trust that I will.
You should maybe hold your breath.
Yeah, I'll hold my breath till Wednesday.
All right.
We'll see how that goes. Mm-hmm. If I can hold my breath till Wednesday. If you don't hear from me, you know what happened.
Right. Although I think we all found out at some point in our lives that you can't hold your breath and kill yourself.
That is true.
Yeah.
You are incapable of doing that.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Yeah.
That's probably a good thing that people can't do that.
I'm just going to stop breathing now.
Yeah. Bye. You have now been switched over to manual breathing mode.
You know, I've actually told over the last few days, people say, "Hey, is there anything you need? I mean, you're not feeling well." Uh-huh. I'm like, "Yeah. You have a gun?"
Oh God. Oh my God.
Yeah. So I'm looking over here to my right at this delicious
bottle of scotch,
thinking, you know what? If I just downed that whole thing right now,
don't drink
I don't want to. No, I don't want to. I want to enjoy it. I want to sip it.
Exactly.
Sip it for over a couple of months. You know.
Yeah.
But
good scotch.
I'm so sick.
I know. I fucking hate being sick.
Oh yeah.
I'm terrible when I'm sick as well. I turn into just a massive baby.
Yeah.
When I'm sick, but I don't have anybody to take care of me, sure. So it doesn't really matter. But if I did have someone to take care of me, I feel like I would just be a total child. Just be I can't do anything. But Zima will not make me food, so
you could just eat Zima.
That would be more trouble.
You think so?
I feel like that would be more difficult than it's worth.
Sure. That's a hairy kitty.
That's true. And which way do you choose to skin it? There's many ways.
More than one way. Yeah.
There's more than one way.
Exactly.
I don't know how many ways there are, but I know there's more than one. You
know what you can't do? You can't swing a dead cat without running into a way to skin a dead cat.
I don't know if I've ever heard the first part of. Is that a thing that people have said?
Yeah, I've
swing
never
a dead
that.
cat.
Like there's like a lot of different things. There's I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of things. You can't swing a dead cat without hitting one of them. I'm like, why are you swinging a dead cat?
Well, that doesn't. It's also like swinging the dead cat doesn't quite make sense to me because also it's not an animal you traditionally swing after. It's not an animal that you traditionally kill that much of anyway. Right. And it's also not an animal that you usually swing around after it's dead. The way like I would a more appropriate version in my mind would be like, you can't swing a dead goose or something, like holding a dead goose by the neck or something like that and swinging it around. That's also, I feel like I've seen that's also a way that people sometimes kill geese. Like barnyard geese, you just grab them by the neck and just kind of swing them or something. Snaps their neck.
Sure.
Which that feels like just a good luck grabbing a goose by the head.
Yeah.
Like that can't be that difficult. That can't be that easy.
But people who don't live here or anywhere where there's a lot of geese don't know what fucking assholes geese are.
Well, even domestic geese are fucking assholes.
Right.
Like even the white feathered like farm geese.
Right.
Are unpleasant and mean, generally speaking. Canadian geese are absolute monsters.
Right.
They're terrifying. I think I've told this before, but there was a time I was kayaking south of my parents' house, and there was this like mother goose with her goslings, and Ryan was there.
Right.
And I was like paddling along, and she could have just crossed the creek and gone up onto the shore, and I could have gone past her and we would have been done with it. Yeah. But instead like her reaction to her threat reaction to my presence was to continue paddling in front of me and to just keep going in front. Like, have you ever had this thing with a cat? Especially where a cat's in your way.
Right.
And instead of just stepping out of the way for a moment, they continue to walk in front of you and then stop. And then you come up to that, you keep walking, and then they're like, oh, I got to move again. And it's like, if you just stood off to the side instead of continuing to walk in front of me, this would be over with. The goose was doing that bullshit. And then she kept on going like she was going to fucking fight me. And it's like, I will hit you with this goddamn paddle. Like this is sharp on one side. I will go to town on this goose. Right. I don't give a shit. Like, there are times like walking around in Oak Park because there's always fucking geese in Oak Park.
In the spring and summer.
Yeah. There are times when like, they'll sort of act like they're about to fight you. Yeah. And I'm just like, I know it's not going to be fun. I know that geese are scary and that it's going to get hurt to get pecked by you.
Right.
I'll fucking drop kick a goose. I don't give a shit. Like, they're at exactly the right height and size to kick. That can't be great for them. I think that's the key with a goose is you have to just not, you have to remain. You can't let your ape brain where like they get their wings all out and try to make themselves look bigger. You can't let that intimidate you, because the truth is there's not really much they can do to you.
No, they can peck you.
They can peck you, and that's gonna hurt.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's really anything a single goose can do to significantly harm an adult human being.
Right.
I think a single Canadian goose is pretty handleable. And so there are times like, I guess I don't know legally, like if a Canadian goose attacks you, are you allowed to like harm it in self-defense?
I don't see why not.
Yeah. I mean, there's a hunting season, but like
we're not in it.
Yeah, I think it's just over with at this point. I think Canadian goose season is. I think it goes into early winter. I have seen plenty of times where there have been people in blinds and there's lots of snow on the ground. So I know it at least goes into a time when there is snow. Not a lot of snow this year.
No.
A disappointingly brown Christmas. It's been
warm.
Yeah, it's been warm. And we've not gotten a lot of snow. And I guess I haven't looked at forecasts much over the last couple of weeks because I haven't really worked all that much over the last couple of weeks. So I don't know if we've got anything really coming in the horizon.
Not really. I mean, we got a slight chance of snow coming up at the beginning of next week,
but I mean, there's sometimes like this happens sometimes where we don't get much snow in December, and then we'll get fucking dumped on one time in January, and that'll stick around until March. But I don't know. It's been a weird winter so far.
You know, it's weird. Anytime somebody tells me that we're gonna have a brown Christmas this year, this makes me feel like there's going to be stomach upset.
I'm dreaming of a brown Christmas. It hurts. Why is it hot? Something was wrong with the ham.
Right.
Something was wrong with the Christmas ham.
It was infected.
The prime rib was underdone.
Right.
The prime rib was raw.
And wriggling.
All right, calm down, Gollum. So shall we talk about the sound of perseverance?
I think so.
Or the sound of perseverance. If you don't know how to say perseverance, which I always forget, by the way, that's the way that perseverance is spelled. Right. I want to put another R in there. Perseverance, but it's spelled perseverance, is the way it's spelled.
Yeah, but it's supposed to be the root of it is supposed to be preserve.
Yeah. Well, because I mean that's what it means to persevere.
Right.
You're preserving. So Sound of Perseverance is the 7th and final studio album from Death, which is depending upon who you ask, the first death metal band. I like that definition of them as the first death metal band. I think Possessed can rightfully have the claim of making the first death metal album.
Yeah.
But I don't know if one would consider them at that point when they made that album to be a death metal band, because death metal didn't exist.
Right.
They didn't, they considered themselves a particularly heavy thrash metal band.
Right.
Death, on the other hand, more or less from its inception, was made to make this kind of music, which very quickly became the genre of death metal. So to my mind, Death is the first death metal band.
Thank you for clearing that up. I agree with that.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to put it, because there's always the disagreement about what's really the first death metal album. And after we listened to Seven Churches, however, maybe that was last year during Death Metal December,
perhaps.
Whenever it was we listened to that, I was like, yeah, this is a death metal album for sure. Death, first death metal band, led by Chuck Schuldiner, who we have given we have used his name for Chuckmas, celebrating his work and the work of Death. Maybe, because we've only got one more album of theirs to go.
Right.
This is the first one. This being the last, next one being the first. After that, we might go and do some Control Denied. I don't know.
Sure. Which essentially, by the way, this year we are essentially doing a Control Denied album.
Yeah. Sound of Perseverance definitely leans a lot more into the progressive metal side of things that Chuck had begun exploring. I mean, like the few Death albums before this had already been leaning in the progressive direction. And Chuck, said as much for that. A couple of these songs were meant to be Control Denied songs that they sort of rewrote and made.
They deathified them.
They deathified them.
I mean, it's the same personnel.
Yeah.
Too. I mean,
same personnel. I guess I'm not super familiar. I know are most of the vocals. I'm under the impression that most of the vocals on Control Denied are more clean or kind of yelled rather than.
They're more in a key of some kind.
More melodic.
I mean, let's face it. Chuck is a pretty good death metal vocalist.
He is.
I don't think what he did really translated all that great to
singing
to singing melodic.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's an example of that on this album.
The last track on the album is a cover of Painkiller, and honestly, I think he kind of fucking killed it.
He did kind of kill it for, I didn't think he was going to do it that well.
Yeah.
He does.
It's a very, very good rendition of Painkiller, by the way, is a Judas Priest song.
Right.
A very, very good rendition of Painkiller, in my opinion.
I mean, they're a stand-up band. I mean, it's
absolutely.
Death. I mean,
But
royalty, yeah.
Certain points, for the vocal performance is like, oh wow, he actually did. He sort of did justice to Rob Halford a little bit, which not easy to do.
No, no, yeah.
It's not easy to properly do justice to Rob Halford's singing. It's a high bar to pass for sure. But that's a fantastic cover of Painkiller. But definitely this album leans more in the sort of in the progressive side. It's probably a bit more melodic in many parts than previous albums had been. But again, they had started leaning in that direction for several albums past as well.
There were a couple of tracks on here that just struck me as just being heavy metal.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, like parts where I'm like, this is almost sounds like something Dio should have done. I mean, this is great right here. I love this part of it, and then it will get back into that sort of progressive death metal sort of arena that you come to expect.
Yeah.
But then,
just sort of playing with like what they could do on a death album, and sort of a thing that a lot of death metal bands had begun to do by the late 90s, which is play with what can death metal be, what else, like we know what the basis of the genre is at this point. What else can we do with it? What can we combine with it? And like melodic death metal had been around for a few years at that point. And if I remember correctly, I don't remember which album it was of theirs that we listened to, but like one of their albums, I don't remember if it was Symbolic or if it was
Human
Human is kind of considered to be like one of the first sort of melodic death metal albums, that like people were like, oh hey, we could start doing this sort of thing, and progressive death metal was becoming a thing. Like 1998 is when fucking Obscura comes out by Gorguts, and that's brain meltingly complex.
Yes.
So like people were definitely playing around with like what the definitions of death metal could be. And I guess this came out in 1998 as well. So it's same year, a good year for progressive death metal. I can't remember what Opeth album came out in 98. I think there was Still Life 1998, or was that like 2000? I can't remember. I'm always shocked at how many Opeth albums there are. It's actually a pretty fucking big discography. Like they've been around for a while, but they were also quite busy. There are some bands that have been around for similarly as long that don't have as many albums as they do. Still Life was 99. My Arms Your Hearse was 98. I know there's one from that one. Yes, we have. I have that on vinyl as well.
Yeah.
It's like I know there's an album there's from 98, but I can't remember. It was a good year for progressive death metal, 1998. But this would be the last album from Death. Chuck would go on to be diagnosed with brain cancer, and he died in 2001?
Yep.
Yeah, he ended up dying in 2001. Was unable to get treatment because he did not have health insurance.
Right. They did fundraisers for him, but it's expensive.
I mean, and brain cancer as well is not one of the more treatable ones.
Right.
So passed away in 2001, which is, it's always sad because then you think about like, what else could he have done?
Right.
Like what else did he have left in him? Seemingly quite a lot.
Yeah.
Because nothing he ever did stagnated. Like death never got boring. It never stopped evolving. That's oddly profound. Death never got boring. Huh. But it's true about the music. It kept on evolving and changing and becoming something different and playing with the formula of it. And it would have been really cool to see what else could have been done.
Right.
But 'twas not to be. Does this album slap?
Yeah.
Oh
yeah,
God.
It does.
Oh God. And I think this album, it's been a bit since I have gone back and listened to too much of Death's discography, sort of, one after the other.
Yeah.
But I think there's like a certain style of like Chuck, and it might not, because I know he the best way to describe his position in the band is he was just guitar player and vocalist. Like,
right.
He would occasionally play some leads, but usually he would play more rhythm.
And here's the thing, you can tell when it's a Chuck lead.
Yeah.
It's very obvious.
Well, he has a very, to my mind, he has a very specific style of playing. Like his like there were a couple of times I'm like on this where it's like, oh yeah, that's kind of a thing that only Chuck Schuldiner does.
Right.
Like I couldn't describe it to you because I'm not a guitarist, so I don't know the terms, but like there's a very particular style of playing that he has that is very him.
Kinds of pedals that he uses.
That too.
That sort of allow that style to be possible.
Yeah. Very fast, I think, is his in general anyway, something that I associate with like Death is the riffs tend to move very quickly.
Yes.
They're very they move very quickly and they tend to flow unless they are intentionally doing some wild progressive metal shit where something just kind of fucking stops.
Yeah.
And then something completely different starts, which happens quite a lot on this album where like, I mean, it's a thing where you start to feel like if you haven't listened to a lot of like progressive rock or progressive metal.
Yes.
I can see it very easily being someone go like, that's just like they just chopped parts of two different songs and then put them one after the other. And it's kind of true. Yeah. The sections of songs that do not flow into each other whatsoever.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of the point. Maybe there's more to it than that from a songwriting perspective, but like sort of skipping ahead a little bit. My favorite song on this album is Spirit Crusher, and there is
I mean that's like the obvious choice right there.
And there are parts of Spirit Crusher. There are kind of two halves of Spirit Crusher that feel like they are completely different songs.
Yeah.
And they kind of go one after the other, back and forth, sort of staggered.
And that's the song I was referring to, and I said, there's just parts of that could have been a Dio song.
Yeah. They do this sort of start-stop thing. That's just very common in progressive rock and progressive metal.
Right. That's my favorite song as well.
It's so good.
Very, very good song.
It's insanely good.
Of the two songs in this album that I really want to hear again right now, it's that one and what's the really long one?
Is it the instrumental one?
No, that one's also very good.
Voice of the Soul.
But I was thinking Flesh and the Power It Holds.
Yeah, Flesh and the Power It Holds is really, really good as well.
Yeah.
I listened to it twice today, and there were several points in where like I hadn't been paying attention for a couple of seconds during Flesh and the Power It Holds.
Yeah.
And then I would be like, oh, this is a different song. And then the chorus would come back and I'd be like, wait, no, this is still the same song.
Right.
Like I was convinced that things had moved on.
Right.
This, by the way, the score that this album has, if you just go and look at like the reviews that are present on the Wikipedia page, comes out to a 93.3.
Right. And 9 out of 10. That's what everybody gave it.
Couple hundreds, couple 90, a bunch of 90s.
Yeah.
The lowest that's present on that page is a 9 out of 10.
Right. And as I was telling you before we recorded, I was like, sort of by 1998, I was already, divorced. For the first time, and I was in broadcasting already.
Yeah.
And I sort of moved on from a lot of metal and death metal at that time.
Yeah.
So I never really got this album and really listened to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I regret it. I feel terrible regret that I didn't own this and have it memorized all this time.
It's fucking great.
It is.
I mean, and again, it's been a bit since I have gone back and like listened through their whole discography. This might be my favorite album of theirs. This might be my favorite death album.
A lot of people say that.
Like I think it's my favorite, and I think it's their best too.
And that makes me feel kind of good.
Yeah,
knowing that Chuck went out on a high note.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like that's and again, thinking about like, going out on a high note, but also remembering, the music was continually evolving and thinking like he had so much more left.
I mean, if you were just going to keep getting better, what was the next thing? Yeah,
what would if there was going to be an 8th album,
right?
What the fuck would that have sounded like?
Afghani flute music.
Well, it's something else that I was thinking, because I mean, I listened to the review or the reissue, which probably has been cleaned up a little bit sonically, but it's hard to tell necessarily recording quality with digital versions sometimes.
Right.
But this sounds fucking great. I mean, that's not
slick.
That's not particularly special for Death. They were always incredibly well produced albums.
Well, it's because they've done it more sound.
Yeah. Well, and even like Scream Bloody Gore sounds fucking great.
Sure.
Like if for an album that is that old and that prototypical of what would become, like it's like Scream Bloody Gore still sounds really good. But this sounds like it could have come out yesterday, if not for like probably some pedals and a couple of sounds that despite everything sound maybe a little antiquated, just because like they don't sound bad, but like you can tell like, oh, that's a type of pedal or an effect that people don't use very much anymore.
Right.
Not to say that it's bad by any means, but it's one of those things where it's like you can tell what era that this was made in, but a little bit by the gear.
See, I used to love shit like that. By the way, I've decided, I've made my New Year's resolution is that the first week of January, I'm going to buy a new guitar.
Oh, shit.
I'm going to start playing again.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. And one of my favorite things, I had this pedal. It had an octave sort of pedal on it, and it had all these different effects, and it was broken. I mean, it did not do the things it was supposed to do.
But did it sound cool?
Oh my God, it was great. There is nothing else on the earth like this.
That's when you when you're like, okay, this is broken.
Yeah.
And then you take it to somebody who like knows how pedals work and makes them, and have them take it apart and look at it and like, okay, like demonstrate. It sounds cool, doesn't it? It's not working the way it's supposed to. Find out why it sounds that way.
If you can replicate
the sound it's making, like look at what way it is broken, and replicate that to make this cool sound.
And I was so sad because we used to play in my friend's mom's basement. That's where we rehearsed.
Yeah.
And their sewer backed up. And it destroyed my pedals.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah.
Oh, God. That sucks. But, so, I mean, we already kind of said what our favorite song.
Right, yeah.
It's got to be Spirit Crusher.
Yeah, it is. Well, that was the single. They actually put out a single for this album.
That was the single, the Spirit Crusher.
Great song.
That was a good choice to put out as the single, too. Yeah. And Spirit Crusher also has a thing that this was kind of that I learned about sort of before I even really listened to Death at all.
Yeah.
There was a post years and years ago on the metalcore page on Reddit talking about what is perhaps one of the most ripped off riffs in metal.
Yeah.
Which is, there's a riff that metalcore fans probably know best from. There's a song on the second Avenged Sevenfold album called Unholy Confessions.
Right.
And it's the opening riff of the song. It's incredibly iconic, but it's basically that riff from Spirit Crusher, which is the dun 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 dun. Like there's a couple more notes in there. There's many different variations to it. But like, so that was sort of the most popular, probably the riff that was like on people's minds is the one from Spirit Crusher. There's a similar riff from a slightly earlier album as well, but I think like there were so many bands who heard Spirit Crusher and like, we're gonna do something like that, and then Unholy Confessions became like the most popular song for Avenged Sevenfold for a long time, and then just metalcore band after metalcore band started doing that riff, or it's not really a riff, I guess, because it doesn't get repeated that much. But I again, this is where my knowledge of music turns
probably still call it a riff.
Yeah, but it's very iconic, and it also is really it gets me very hyped up, that riff in Spirit Crusher.
That reminds me, I was at the grocery store the other day buying some more pierogies. And Hail to the King was on.
Oh boy,
was on the overhead.
The most boring Avenged Sevenfold song.
Well, yeah, but it's playing at the grocery store.
That's true. I mean, it's basically Avenged Sevenfold's the equivalent to like Enter Sandman,
right?
For Avenged Sevenfold, where it's it's a boring and safe. Yes. It's a very safe song that like it's the very recognizable, and you can kind of put it anywhere.
Oh, I do
for people.
I do remember when that Black Album came out. and then it was a KBQ 100 local radio station played Enter Sandman. And they said, we're going to hear some Metallica on the radio. I'm like, Metallica on the radio? That's something I've never heard before. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then it was that song. And I remember going, oh
no.
Is this from the new album? I haven't picked up the new album yet.
I know there is finally a new Avenged Sevenfold album that I have not listened to, because it was like, before then, it was like 2017 was the album before that. Came out in 2017.
Almost 7 years ago.
It'd been a long time. And I actually liked that album. It was called The Stage. Like they got a little weird with it. They got a little progressive with it.
Yeah.
I thought it was it was a very welcome change of pace versus Hail to the King, which was fucking boring. It was just, The Stage did not sell well whatsoever, because it was a little bit more out there. And also they did not promote the release of the album whatsoever. They were trying to do that like quiet, like, oh, we're going to quietly drop the album, and it did not work out.
Right.
But I think artistically it was a much better album than what had come previously. But I have no idea what this new one sounds like. I just know it was in the oven for an incredibly long period of time.
Sure.
So it better be good. But in any case, it's been a while since I've listened to anything from them, other than that time when I was like, hey, let's go back and listen to this album from 2010 and see if I still like it. And I kind of didn't like it.
That's so depressing when that happens.
Well, and especially because it was an album that I remember being so good.
Right.
It was Nightmare. I remember Nightmare being so good.
We did it like the first year we did the podcast, didn't we?
Maybe not the first year, but it was early. Yeah. It was early on. But I remember that album being really good, and it just did not hold up.
Right.
But Death. We talked about Spirit Crusher. We had Flesh and the Power It Holds is also fantastic.
Yes.
Just so many different, there's so much going on in that song.
Yes.
Voice of the Soul is...
It's one of two instrumentals Death ever did.
And it's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
It is a beautiful song. It's also one of the only like acoustic guitar led tracks that they ever did.
Right.
It's good stuff. It's good stuff. I guess all that's left to ask is what medal do you bestow upon the sound of perseverance like Maz Kanata to Chewbacca?
It gets a gold.
Yeah, come on.
Of course it does.
Come on. Yes, this absolutely gets a gold. Like I said, this is I think this is definitely my favorite album that Death has made, and I think it's the best. Yeah. I think it's the best. I think they went out on a high note, which is more than some bands can say.
Right.
That sort of reminded me a little bit. Going out on a high note reminded me of Dillinger Escape Plan, which then reminded me of the fact that there is a new supergroup that Greg Puciato is in that I texted you about. It's called Better Lovers, with Will Putney from Fit for an Autopsy, also just very prolific music producer, an engineer, and with Jordan Buckley and a couple other people from the final lineup of Every Time I Die.
Yep.
No Andy Williams, unfortunately, but he's probably still busy wrestling.
Sure.
I imagine he just transitioned to doing that full time after ETID dissolved.
Right.
And just, committed full time to wrestling, because he's in AEW. So he's televised professional wrestling. But so it sounds, I gotta say, like I think you can, to me, I can sort of hear Andy's absence a little bit.
Yeah.
Because he always added in that slightly weird, that one off note that was always a little weird, that made ETID kind of what it is. But this doesn't necessarily need to be Every Time I Die, but it sounds like them. Which also, it's like, how much of because I never really knew who was doing most of the songwriting. So it's like, how much of that was Jordan, I wonder. But it kind of sounds like Etid, but it also ends up sounding a lot like Dillinger just because it's got Greg's vocals on it. And it's sort of almost weird how much like heavy lifting Greg's vocals seemed to do in that sense to like defining Dillinger's sound. Obviously bonkers songwriting as well, but like there's something about having Greg's vocals on anything where he's doing screamed vocals instead of just clean like he does for his solo stuff.
Right.
Having Greg's like unhinged screamed vocals goes a long way to making something sound like Dillinger Escape Plan.
Sure.
It's a weird sort of love child between Etid and Dillinger, which were always like very much in the same arena as each other as far as those kinds of bands go. And then Will Putney adds in his contribution seems to be like a couple parts of like there's some like really clean melodic stuff here and there. On the EP that they put out that like I was not expecting to pop up. And it was like, oh, that's like sort of unexpected little bits. But yeah, they have an EP out called God Made Me an Animal, I think is what it's, if I remember correctly, that's what it's called.
By Better Lovers. Really good stuff. I very much recommend it. And by the way, announced in early December, Dillinger is doing a couple of reunion shows. Nice.
I don't know if I know their original vocalist is performing with them. I don't know if Greg is performing with them at all, or if they're both going to be there.
Yeah.
Or I don't remember what the deal was, but a friend of mine, who's my friend from college, her boyfriend, he's like a musician and he's got some people that he went to high school with who are in a band from Georgia, the mathcore band called, I cannot remember their name, but anyway, they're like opening at that show, but like I hadn't heard about this reunion. And so he was like, yeah, my friends, their band is, they're playing with Dillinger Escape Plan. And I was like, that can't be true because that band broke up in 2017. And he was like, well, either they lied to me or that's not the case. And then he's like, no, they're doing some reunion. He looked it up. It's like, they're doing some reunion shows. It's like, what the fuck? I missed that. So that's, just something kind of cool that I found out. There's a bunch of albums that have sort of snuck up. There's a new Silent Planet album that came out a bit ago that I missed the window for when it came out.
Sure.
But
so you can no longer get it.
Yeah, I can no longer get it. It's gone. But anyway, I think that's going to do it for this Chuckmas.
Yes.
And for the year.
Yeah.
We'll see you next year. I hate myself.
But we start Black Metal January.
Yeah, Black Metal January. So this was my week, I think. So it'll be you next. So do you know what you want to bring?
Yes. An album that you are thoroughly going to. Well, it's an EP actually. This is an EP, but they counted it as a full album because it's the only thing they ever put out.
Okay.
They were black metal adjacent, very important to the first wave of black metal scene.
The first wave, okay.
It's an album called Apocalyptic Raids
by
Hellhammer.
Oh boy, because that's Hellhammer became Celtic Frost. Well, we'll see. We'll see. We know how I feel about Celtic Frost.
But I will tell you this. The phenomenon you were talking about earlier where you go back and you listen to something and you go, oh, man.
And it's not good as you remember?
Right. This had the opposite.
It's way better than you remember.
This is way better. I remember listening to it for the first time going, this is dumb.
Okay.
And then like a couple of years ago when I listened to it again, I'm like, oh, there's certain subtleties to this that I didn't pick up on when I was a dumb kid.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll see. We'll see about that. I do know what I am going to be doing after that, which is the new Panopticon album that also snuck out while I wasn't paying attention recently. So we'll be doing that later on in the month. But for now, thank you all very much for listening to this Chuckmas episode of the Bronze Metalist Podcast. If you want to, go ahead, follow us on social media on Facebook or the website formerly known as Twitter. Or just go ahead and subscribe to our feed on whatever device or service you're using to listen to us right now. Until you hear from us next year. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Bronze Metalist podcast. I'm Kale.
I'm Pneumonia.
Congratulations.